welcome to the Storypath System Storyguide Roundtable. My name is Travis Legge. My pronouns are he, him, or they. And we're just getting together to talk about this beautiful Storypath system, our experiences running it or acting as players, both online and away from it. A couple of us have also maybe written a thing or two, so might be able to give a little bit of insight there. Appreciate you all popping in and everybody taking their time out of this lovely Tuesday evening to sit down and have this chat. Thought it might be a fun time. Thought there might be some people who rolled in with some questions. If you're in the audience and you have a question about how Storypath works, feel free to type question in the chat with all caps so that we're sure that we see it. And I'll be scrolling through from time to time, checking those out. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of dive in. It's going to be relatively informal and theoretically a fun time. So let's put that theory to the test right away by starting off our introductions with Chaz. Please tell us who you are, what you do, your experience with Storypath, pronouns, and where we can find you on the interwebs. Anything you might want to plug if you have it.
Hi, I am Chaz. He, him, they, them, both work fine for me. I'm a PhD student who studies like video games and music storytelling, just how all those things work together to be like super fun. Storypath. Most of my experience with Storypath is actually with Scion. I was lucky enough to trick Travis into allowing me to be the storyteller earlier this year, and so I was able to do the like introductory thing that Scion has, which was super fun. Actually, I was just thinking, I'm pretty sure that Gilbert here has been in all my Scion shit. Like everything I've run, Gilbert has allowed me to make him the asshole.
I'd hesitate to use the word make in that context, but continue.
Do it to myself. I do it to myself a lot.
Oh gosh, yeah, I did the introduction. Gilbert was part of the much longer thing we did, Scion Become as Gods. And then other than Scion, I've been with my forever DM Travis doing some Trinity stuff. Like right now we are in, what? Oh my God, it was just yesterday. Trinity Anima, where we are, it is that time of the semester, like everything's gone. We're like playing these characters who are also playing MMO characters, which is just like everything that makes me happy. It's so good.
It was really good, yeah. It's currently on Kickstarter. I'll go ahead and throw the link in the chat. But continue.
Yeah. So that is my my storyteller stuff. Where you can find me on the internet, not very much. I don't have a large presence on the internet. I have worked with Travis on a class collection over in the vault. What's the vault? The vault thing.
Vault.
That vault, yeah. I think right now that's the only place you can really find me on the internet outside of like some Onyx Path YouTube stuff. That's essentially me in a nutshell.
Sweet, I appreciate the nutshell. And yeah, if you want to catch up on Become as Gods or watch Chaz's run through of A Light Extinguished, which was the Scion Jumpstart, those are both on the Onyx Path YouTube. And just going counterclockwise, yes, that beautiful A Light Extinguished right there. No, I'm gonna go counterclockwise, and we're gonna have Hiromi, if you would please give us your pertinent details and your background with Storypath and all that fun stuff.
I'm Hiromi. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the Scion line developer. I've been writing and playing with Storypath games for 5 years. My timeline's on. What the fuck?
2020 counts as 3. I know that.
I think several decades, I guess. I mean, so yeah, I mainly with Scion, but also plenty of fun stuff with Trinity. Damn it. Why am I blanking? I don't know. I'm blanking.
I do that every time Travis asks me to introduce myself.
I know I put people on the spot all the time, and I'm like, all right.
It doesn't help that
And then
like
I blank.
he was like clockwise. We know counterclockwise, and I'm watching the stream and like we're like shifting around on the thing, and I'm like,
Are we?
I don't. We
Oh.
were. I don't know that that's happening anymore.
I
But
think it's fixed now.
okay.
I hope.
Well, now I can't blame you anymore for
Good.
that. I'll find another
I
reason to
mean,
blame you. Like,
Your cup runneth over, I assure you.
they came from. Holy shit!
Yes, that
it.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a ton of the cinematic mechanics for no, not a ton of them. I did all of them. For they came from Classified and they came from the Cyclops' Cave. Yeah, no, I write and I develop and I also write queer fiction because who doesn't?
Right.
Or rather, everyone should.
Everyone
One of
should
the two.
at least dip a toe or some other appendage in the queer fiction. All right, moving on from dipping into the queer fiction. Maybe could have phrased that differently, I guess. So Gilbert,
Hi.
please, you're pertinent. I don't even remember what we're here doing.
I'm Gilbert Ramos. You might know me from Onyx past channels for running Vampire the Masquerade. We've now transitioned that over to our channel, twitch.tv/rolling nomads. He, him. I'm doing better this time, I promise. I, like Chaz said, I've been a part of all of his Scion things, but Become as Gods was fantastic. You should watch that on YouTube. Big fan of Scion, such a big fan, in fact, that I have also tricked Travis into allowing me to run a Scion game coming in January after the holidays, after everyone has their breaks and whatnot. I have no idea what we'll call it. Probably Scion Godsend. I don't know. I can't really top Become as Gods. That's pretty nuts. Yeah, that's coming in January. I got a group of players that are gonna do wild stuff. It sounds like they're gonna be not great demigods. I don't know what their plan is. They're probably gonna conquer the West, like the entire West. They already have delusions of grandeur. It's beautiful.
And are they starting out at origin level? Is that the plan?
Yeah, they're gonna start out at origin level, and very specifically, like the in the book, the band term goal says like, oh, this should be a realistic goal, something that you guys can accomplish. And they're like, we're gonna fight everything. Don't do that. Like, nice. But yeah, that's gonna come in January. I'm very excited for it. So I'm very excited. I'm probably gonna have a bunch of questions for you, Hiromi. Very, very excited for Scion. What else do I do? I helped Travis do a couple things. Bloody But Unbowed is on Storyteller's Vault.
That is true.
Introductory scenario for Vampire the Masquerade. I did some character write-ups for Trinity Continuum, the notes that we did for our Aberrant game. I'm working on a project right now that I'm not entirely, I'll be absolutely honest, I'm not entirely sure if it's legal. It's turned into something that I feel like is full-on copyright. We started doing like Wraith rules for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, and then it turned into like my buddy got real into it, so it's turned into like rewriting the entire Wraith system. So I'm not sure that's legal. So we might have to dial back on that a little bit.
Yeah, you should talk to the good folks at the Storytellers Vault about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna before I get sued. Yeah. That's all I got. I'm real bad at introducing myself, guys. I'm so sorry.
You're doing wonderfully. And last but not least, that leaves us with Scott. Please give us all of your pertinent details.
Sure. My name is Scott Cuban. My pronouns are he, him. I am on a couple places on the internet. I run Simulacra Studios, which is an actual play studio. You can find us on YouTube and Twitch at Simulacra TV. Currently running an Trinity Continuum Aberrant actual play there. It's called Atomic Youth. It's based on teen superheroes, for lack of a better term, the Aberrant, superhero. I'm also a co-host of the Polyhedron RPG Discussion podcast. and also newly co-host of the Opcast Trinity Continuum Review and Retrospective podcast. So that's where I am. You probably may have seen me on the actual play of Anima that's running concurrently with the Kickstarter through the Onyx Path YouTube channel. I play Mockno on that, so that's fun. And I was on the Storypath showcase for a Trinity Continuum Aeon game with Travis and Hiromi.
Special appearance by the sun.
Oh, special appearance by the sun. Absolutely. Can't forget the Unconquered Sun showing. Oh, not the Unconquered Sun. Sorry. No, just the actual sun. Yeah, I was in on that. I contributed some notes to the eventual write-up that's going to show up regarding that. I'm slowly getting over my writer's block, and I'm working on a Storypath Nexus item that should be coming in the next couple of months. So that'll be my debut there. And other than that, my experience with the Storypath system is mostly focused on the Trinity Continuum. I've been a huge fan of Trinity and all of its associated works for a really long time, and I really love the new edition. So I am doing a lot of work in that. Once I'm done filming the Aberrant game, the Atomic Youth game, I'm planning on going into as high mode of production on an Aeon game. That'll be on my Twitch channel. So I'm really looking forward to getting that started. So that's my general experience regarding that.
I'm looking forward to seeing it because that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Taking Aeon into that level of. If you haven't checked out Atomic Youth yet, I highly recommend anyone in the sound of my voice do so. It's really good.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, it is a fun show, and it's executed very, very cleverly. So speaking of fun things that are executed with cleverness, I wanted to kick off the conversation because just existing in a space on the internet, once in a while you run across a couple people who maybe might not be aware of like what Storypath is, how Storypath functions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just like some of the very, very basic, like if you, speaking to the games, I guess, that you have the most experience with, right? If you had to like elevator pitch someone the system and how it ties into the world or how you feel that it represents the world, you had to give them the real quick breakdown of like how would you characterize it, I guess would be the first sort of question that I would like to just tackle. If you have like a succinct view of the system and how it relates to a particular setting, whether that be the setting that you're, say, the lead content lead of. Ooh, that's the word. Or just one you've played a lot. Does anybody want to volunteer to dive on that grenade?
Yeah, sure. So Storypath is I've heard it said skill first, but I kind of like the idea of skill focused RPG system that excels at specifically at action scenes, social intrigue, and investigation scenes. There's other stuff that you can do with the system, but like those are like the three kind of genre pillars that the game works around.
Yeah, and that is a exceedingly succinct and accurate description. I often tell people if you are like writing an adventure for Storypath, like those are the things you want to focus on. Those are the beats that you want to make sure you've got the crunch to support, because everything else can kind of fall into place. And then obviously there are variations between the different settings. And the systems interact with those settings differently as well.
I like pushing on the button that like the three types of scenes that Storypath is good with, because there are different systems out there that maybe focus in different areas. Like basically all versions of D&D are just combat, and then like you can do other stuff, but I've actually checked the amount of rules, rule space, page, fucking word count, Jesus, word count designated for other things. And like D&D has like, I want to say about a quarter of the space dedicated to social encounters as Shadowrun. Shadowrun, the cyberpunk game where you break into Megacorps and shoot the shit, just shoot everything up and hack everything, has like 4 times as much information on how you can run social encounters. And I'm like, I know that like what people generally say is like, oh, I love the role playing in D&D. I'm like, that's what you're doing with the system. The system doesn't support it, at least not very well. And then you have systems like Fate, which are like, we're not really focused on anything. We're kind of good at everything, but we don't have like a specific thing that we want you to do. We just have like, you have like an approach, you have a thing. Okay, yeah, sure. Just roll these dice, get some pluses. You're good. And like, there's tons of systems out there that like they do specific things. Green Ronin's age system, modern age, fantasy age, like those things, they're great, and they kind of actually focus on the same areas that Storypath does. They just do it with D6s instead of D10s.
Gotcha. Okay, and I'm not horrendously familiar with that particular system. It's been on my radar to check out the one Green Ronin system, and I think it's similar to the Age system, but I don't think it uses quite the same engine. The one that I've checked out that I really enjoyed was Orc, which is like a comedy game. It's comedy forward, I guess you would say. It's really about the funny, and there happens to be dice too. But yeah, I think that's a pretty solid explanation. Is there anything that you would add to or modify that for, I guess, anybody else in the room? Any other points that you wanted to bring up about the way it functions?
I mean, I have some stuff to say about that. I think that in addition to everything that Hiromi said, it's also really good at crafting cinematic style role playing. Like, it's very good at presenting like scenes that make sense in the context of like film and TV, like that style. And it's also incredibly good at differing power levels, like interactions between characters of vastly different scales of power, while not just having to rely on buckets and buckets of dice.
Yes,
like it's real good at that.
The elimination of the massive dice pools is, don't get me wrong. I have as much of an inner dice goblin as the next person, and Hiromi has a whole TikTok about being a dice goblin. But it is nice to be able to roll a tribute for your character and not have to worry about like herniating something.
Nice.
Your gallon jug, is that the gallon jug of old dice? Is that what that is?
It's my gallon that one is specifically the D20 gallon jug of dice that I will gift to other people. My actual dice are these 10 plastic containers up here that are just barely in frame.
Yeah, I mean, you do commit to a dice habit, and then, the next thing you know, you've got plastic containers everywhere. Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, and I think that one of the things, well, I guess there's a lot to unpack there. So I guess before we get into anything new, Gilbert or Chaz, did you have anything to add to those sort of basic notes?
The thing that really helps me wrap my mind around it was when I realized it was kind of like a yes and system, because I was like I started doing when I was a DM, and if you have to roll a d20, and if it's above the certain number, it's success, and if below it's like a fail. Whereas in Scion or Storypath, like usually one success is enough. I mean, depending on like the power level of the thing, but it comes with like complications. So it could be like, yes, like you catch the guy, but you also slip and fall, and everyone laughs at you. Like, and so it's this like building of like this yes and like you did the thing, but like what happened? Did you buy the complications? Can you add extra things? And that really helps build that like everyone is telling the story, because there's like, oh, how many can we attribute? Can we work together to like give you some successes? And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Go ahead, Gilbert. You said you had something?
Yeah. I mean no disrespect when I say this, but I had to do this because I was dumb. Um, I had to look at it as it was the storyteller system with a hat on for a while, until I really kind of dug in and was like, okay, I'm gonna learn this, damn it. But I've come to realize it's not storyteller system with a hat on. It's similar in the fact that there's dots. My elevator pitch to somebody would be, it's simpler. I like the idea that it's simpler than D&D because it's just, a dot is a dice, that's what you roll. It to me feels like like you guys said, the scale is fantastic. There's no mechanic for scale in other systems that I can see, like, oh, for example, D&D, like using not I feel like I'm gonna feel like I'm trash talking D&D the entire time, but it's the world's most popular role-playing game, and it's like they don't have a mechanic for scale. Like if you like, oh, and we're gonna fight this dude in the inn, it's like, well, you can do that, but I have no way of showing you or making you realize that he's a lot more powerful than you until he hits you and then one-shots you. It's there's, and like Hiromi said, there's not a whole lot of like social encounter unless the DM kind of enforces that. Elevator pitch for Storypath would be that it's easy to learn, if you want to. If the dots, like the rolling the dice is easy, but you come to realize that there's a lot more mechanics for customization and for like different scenes and scenarios. There's a lot more. You can set the scene and like mechanically attribute things to the environment, whereas other systems I feel kind of fall short in that. It's really dope.
It does a very good job of giving sort of every element of the story the ability to flip a mechanical toggle, without requiring you to flip those mechanical toggles, or without making it somehow like a failure if you don't. That's like I am very much a story over system type of story guide. That's how I roll.
Absolutely.
I like to tell a good story, and sometimes we roll dice because we like the way they sound. But
Yeah.
and I think Storypath works very well in one regard, that the wheels don't come off if you ignore a chunk of the system. You have it's very much built like in layers that wrap around that core mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
You can run a Storypath game and never once have a roll that involves difficulty. You can run a Storypath game and never once have a roll that involves complication. You can just flat out say, all right, all your rolls are going to be difficulty. Roll, you get your target number, bang, we've done it. You don't have to turn those toggles on. The more you do, the more you get to craft the experience that you want it to be, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
But and those things, all of those things, while they might seem similar at first glance, they all sort of tug in a different direction. They represent a different thing. They give you a different approach and a different feel and different sets of consequences. If you increase the difficulty of an action, for example, you're making it just literally harder to attain. Whereas with the complication, it's you succeed, but like you were saying, Chad. And being able to combine those and mix and match those and play with those, and then each of the settings also has its own personal, like internal toggles that move along with that. Well, so for example, if you're looking at the way scale functions, and they came from Beneath the Sea versus Scion, they might operate a little bit differently between those two, but they're internally which for the most part I think is a good call, because it helps ground that into its own silo, so you can sort of start, if you're playing multiple of these games, you can start building those associations in your mind. But you also don't necessarily have to learn them. I mean, they're all in these beautiful books that are all available at Drive-Thru RPG, and many are available at your friendly local game store. So you can always go back and. So I guess one of the things that I would love to dive into a little bit, because scale had come up. So I think I think one of the potential pain points when people are first engaging with the system, when to use scale, how scale works, and how scale works differently when it comes to a player character. Because in its shorthand, and anyone, especially Hiromi, is free to correct me if I'm wrong here. But in the shorthand, your scale is orders of magnitude by which you are, there's a difference, whether it be size, whether it be mystical might, whether it be, your speed, so on and so forth. You have narrative scale, which is generally just applied when you're running a scene. It doesn't necessarily affect like the action per se, and just kind of flows forward. Then you have your dramatic scale, which is when you're actually like in combat, rolling dice, things matter, and the players are involved, right? And I know there's some. I think one of the things that people miss is when the players are involved, whether the player is the one initiating the challenge or whether the player is on the receiving end of the challenge, the scale never completely eliminates as it will do in narrative. So no matter what your scale difference is, you still have an opportunity. And that's something I know I've seen just in discussions online be a bit of a sticking point. So I guess with those different types of scale, with narrative and dramatic scale, I imagine that's something you probably run into a lot running Aberrant, Scott, right? That's probably, I would assume, a relatively constant issue.
Oh yeah. Aberrant, I think, deals with scale more than any other Storypath game. It's
down, yeah.
it's defined. It's defined a lot more granularly than any other Storypath game. However, I will say that one of the biggest benefits of Storypath game system as a whole is that because you have that definition of aberrant, it is so easy to take the descriptions set forth in aberrant and port it to any Storypath game with only minor tweaking. Because the system is so like it's cross-compatible and in fundamental ways. It's real, like if you wanted to play with scale more in Scion or in They Came From or any other Storypath game, you could look at Aberrant and see what they do there and get that granularity across onto another system. But yeah, scale's a big deal in Aberrant, especially when you're dealing with not just between other novas, but novas and non-novas. It really comes into play there. And it's just, who's better at what and what's the consequence of that is really, really, it's a very useful tool for shaping those interactions.
And have you found, once you're in the thick of it at the table, have you found a difficulty in applying that scale, the difference between the narrative and the dramatic, for example? Does that seem like it kind of is the type of thing that falls into place once you've done it a couple times? Are there any tips or tricks you have for making calls about that? I
honestly haven't used narrative scale that much. It doesn't really. I've found that it's not really come into play. It's just that I don't tend to need that guidance when it's in that arena. I'm more comfortable with just sort of like, saying what happens in narrative scale as opposed to using the mechanics. Also, because Aberrant has a thing called the collateral pool that it kind of does the same thing. I find that's more useful for Aberrant than narrative scale is.
Yeah, keeping in mind like the social collateral pool, right? Like
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite things there is because like you can be running around throwing around this mega presence and whatnot, and then you misspeak or
Yeah.
something bad happens and now you're canceled.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I
and
mean,
like,
it's not even that. It's just, you are making waves.
Mhm.
And maybe you didn't misspeak. Maybe it's because you did something too good, and then unintended consequences flow from that. And I think that it's a really useful tool for Aberrant, more so than narrative scale as written.
Yeah, that's a good insight and a good tip. Um, and Hiromi, correct me if I'm wrong, but as Scion is rolling out the higher tiers of play, scale is about to become. There's some expansion on scale in those later books, correct? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Both in terms of what scions can do and in terms of what's going on with the world and the realms. Like they're fuck it, why not? There are antagonists coming out that have I want to say size scale 5 and 6. So for people who aren't like staring directly at the scale chart, I'm talking about shit that's like mountain sized. Go punch it. What's the worst that could happen?
Well, I would imagine if you're a god of punching, nothing too bad. If you're a god of like floral odors, might not work out so well for you.
My players will punch it nonetheless. I promise you that will get used.
That reminds me, I meant to say this earlier, but we were in like introduction rolling over mode. So you're going to have your character or your players going from origin to demigod, taking over the West. Not to say that you have to or even need to look at it, but I wrote an adventure, Zeus, we just want to talk. In
We
which
we saw that.
you can, get a relic electric guitar that doesn't need an amp, just plays on its own because it's a fucking relic made from one of Zeus's lightning bolts. You
Love
can
that.
fucking hit him in the face with it.
Oh, that's top notch.
That is one of the like 10 possible ways to solve that I outlined. I mean, you can talk to him too. You can have like a storytelling contest, a seduction contest, whatever. But you can also just hit him in the fucking face with an electric guitar.
That's the way
I'm
to
not
be.
saying that that's something that your players will definitely do. I'm just saying that they might.
If I present them that option, they absolutely will. They saw the lightning bolt in Hero as a relic. And they're like, oh, can this thing be stolen from me? And I read into it and I was like, no, you can just yeet that into the clouds and that's where it stays until you need it. And they're like, we want that real bad. I'm like, I don't know if I should give that to you. I don't know if you should be able to take that as your origin birthright stuff. Okay, I don't know about that.
It may be a little advanced for you at that stage in the game.
Yeah.
Well, and Chaz, you've done the stream that goes from hero to demigod, right? Like you've walked that path. Now you walked it at a somewhat accelerated pace.
Yeah. So I think we only had one person actually like transition. So I think Gilbert's character went from like origin to hero, and then maybe was like, and then we like jumped forward ahead a couple years. And then it was like Ali's character that went from like hero to demigod, then jumped forward a couple years. But yeah, we
Did you
ran the
find
gambit.
did you find any particular challenges in that gear shift as you're opening? Because one of the things that's interesting to me, and I'm not a big Scion. I have played Scion one time, any edition. So I would love to sit at some Scion tables in the near future, but have not had the opportunity to do so. But in Trinity Continuum, which is probably what I have the most like experience, probably writing and playing in, all of these different scales of power are constantly existing at the same time, and you're generally dealing with a situation where everyone is on the same playing field, right? As far as the PCs. Whereas in Scion, it seems like and also with Trinity, like once you're on that band, you're pretty much on it. Short of becoming a proxy, if you're if you're like a Scion or a Syad, you're never gonna get a tier bump, right? So, did you find anything particularly challenging or particularly keen about that shifting gears and that sort of increasing tier along with scale?
I think the most interesting thing was the one episode where Gilbert switched gears before everybody else. Like it was his narrative. His character was like leading that first arc. He got stabbed by a death god because that's what you do. He became a death god because that's what you do. But then there's this, yeah. But then there's this death god running around with like just people, people who will become strong. But it was very clearly like the Gilbert show, and I didn't like anticipate like how that switch in scale was going to like change the dynamics of the group, because then, and luckily like it was a great group, like they all knew each other, but for that one day it was like, well, we have to defer to Gilbert because like I can make a phone call and call the police, he can suck the life energy out of somebody. It was very clear which one we're going to do. But other than that, like everything was fine. I think one of the big reasons like we didn't even come across scale that much is because like all the like high scale characters were kind of like beneficial in a sense. So like all the gods made appearances, but they were all like kind of mentor types. They never attacked, so you never really saw the scale difference. You could ask them to like do a thing, but that was very much a narrative scale. So it's like, hey, Ryujin, go do a rainstorm over there so we can like hightail it this way.
Did you say never attacked? I was
one
stabbed,
time.
Chaz.
One time.
Jeremy's visitation was getting mauled by wolves. What do you mean?
Oh, yeah. Twice. 2 times.
Listen, only 7 times did I have.
Each of you was attacked once.
Nice, love it.
Oh God.
Any further insights from the player side, I guess, on that, Gilbert, in experiencing sort of that journey? Was that did you experience any, I guess, even system shock or just setting shock as you were going through those jumps, or did it feel pretty smooth?
Not really like setting shock. I would say with my experience with Vampire, I'm used to the modern setting as well. So I feel like if you come straight from D&D, you know you're going to have a little bit of setting shock of like, oh, it's modern and it's strange because you know it's a modern setting yet it's fantasy. But I've done that before and that's one of my favorites. I love my first like fandom, I guess you can call it. It was mythology. So a setting with gods, a game that like where all myths are true and you can do demigods and whatnot. I was just like chomping at the bit. System shock, yeah, because like I said, at first glance, you kind of look at Scion and Storypath, and you're like, "What the hell is complication? What's enhancement? How do I do this?" But you know, just taking a minute to look it over, it's great. In regards to scale, I became very aware of scale because, like Chaz said, I was not expecting to be the first one to have a visitation. And I was like, I talked to Chaz. This was still early on in our friendship, and I was like, hey, I don't want to like overshadow anybody. I don't want to like, you know, I've had visitation, but I don't want it to be like, you know, I don't want to like be default leader or you know have this suddenly become about me. He was like, don't worry about it. I promise you that it won't just be just you. So I focused as a player, knowing that it was a kind of a bump up. I focused more on like the personal stuff. Like, yeah, he was now a Scion, now had his visitation and whatnot. I focused more on like what that meant for the character, because like realistically I don't feel like we would, unless you're going to go full supervillain, I don't think like you would just immediately start like draining the life out of everyone you meet, or like
Maybe.
using your powers to the best of your ability. I mean, me personally, oh yeah, I'd be a villain top notch. There's no saving me. I would rule all of you, everyone. I would be God Emperor of this planet. I promise it would be fine. But yeah, no, I focused more to kind of counteract the scale aspect of it. It was like the gripe of what he had become. So I mean, I feel like if you focus on character stuff, you can kind of get away with the power differential if there's like an uneven thing.
Yeah, because then your character became like very sad because one, like his aunt tried to kill him, but then two, like you made a mistake and like almost killed Meg. And so like, even though you had all this power, you were like, I can't use it. Dear God, I can't use it.
Yeah. I almost killed our Kitsune friend.
Oops. Well,
that was my bad.
You have a propensity for interacting with scale on the receiving end of an attack.
Oh yeah.
Because I seem to recall us just beating the shit out of your character repeatedly during the Aberrant stream. Like during a scale 1 punching bag.
Yeah, Aberrant, and I rewatched that specific stream to do the write-ups and whatnot for it. And multiple times you were like, this is a little bit more crunchy than the other Storypath systems. Just take it slow. If you have questions, ask. I did not ask questions because I was ashamed. But I built my guy and I was like, okay, I'm thinking Jason Todd type. I'm thinking like, just a dude with a gun, basically, just shoots well. He had like the ability to cloak himself, to go invisible, and to absorb damage. Chaz made a fucking monster. He can make dark, like just dark black holes appear in buildings, and everyone else was like I think Alex was like a crystalline mutant. Pesto would just like had a bag of tricks, like tinkering and stuff. Everyone else was like just nigh demigods,
like
and I'm just there with a gun. Yeah, as Aberrant was supposed to be, and I'm like. And then they made me the de facto leader of that. And I'm like, I have no business telling you guys what to do. So we fought this dude named Wrath who punches with the strength of of nuclear bombs. And he very nearly one-shot me. And I was like, everything is broken. All of my ribs, my legs. Please, somebody help. Alex comes over and just stabs me with some magic fluid or whatever. And I'm back up and I'm like, huh. I'm gonna stay in the back.
Yeah,
Aberrant's good for that. Like that, the degree of customization that you can pull off an Aberrant, and like all the mechanical tricks you can pull. If that's your type of fun, Aberrant is a real good game for that.
It was so cool. It was very cool to see. Like, I don't know. Like, like I said, everyone else was just superhuman, like powerhouses. And there was a moment in the stream, I think, where I think it was like the first time I met or was about to meet the rest of the band, because I was late for session 1, or I missed session 1. And the building exploded and I got rocketed back into like a boat on the docks. And Travis asked for a roll and I was like, okay, what do I roll? And he's like, do you have mega stamina? I'm like, I don't have mega anything, Travis. I'm no.
My eyes kind of went wide. I was like, oh, uh-oh.
Yeah. I was like, I've got absorption. He's like, well, thank God for that.
So, yeah, there's a lot of, you can wind up in a lot of sticky situations as scale rubs up against scale. But even then, it's all manageable and mitigatable. And there are some, one of the things I do like about Storypath is I feel like it very much focuses on the fact that your characters are the heroes of the story. Like, you're the stars of the movie, you're the stars of the TV show, you're the ensemble cast we care. And so the system is engineered to facilitate that and to keep the light shining on you. And with some controls built in. Like, it's very difficult to just straight up kill somebody, right? Outside of Storyguide, pulling a narrative lever. The system has checks and balances built in that make it exceedingly complicated to do more than 2 health levels of damage. And with everybody starting with like a minimum of 3, probably not going to happen. Are there other bits in the system that you, just in interacting with the system in any way, shape, or form, that you can really like jump out at you as like, oh, this is indicative of this type of storytelling, or this really works well to illustrate X? Are there any examples of that jump to mind, Hiromi?
Yeah, actually, tailing off of your example of it being really hard to do more than 2 health levels of damage. So it's nearly impossible. It's not impossible to be one-shotted, but it's nearly impossible. And beyond that, the default condition for losing all your health levels is not dying. It's being taken out, which is not the same thing at all. Like, you can get killed, but that's like a specific thing that your story guide has been like, well, guess you die now. And it's not something that the system obliges you to do. So, and like that ties back into its cinematic roots, the idea that this is a larger than life experience that's going on, where like, unlike say D&D, where you hit 0 hit points and in earlier editions you just die, and then in later editions you start dying and then die. In Storypath, it's like you get taken out, and then if everyone gets taken out, we don't have to end this game, but you are not going to like what happens next, because now you're all tied up in chains above a vat of acid, and here's a puzzle, try to get out. Like, there's narrative hooks built in where you can be like, okay, we're going to do something to change the flow of this game, because you are no longer able to be like, we are the fightiest fighters who ever fighted. That's not English.
Close
English
enough.
as far as I know it.
Close enough for Horseshoe.
But like you get to play with that. And also there are, across the various lines, there are like boons and powers and cinematics that actually tie into that, where you're like, you know what? I will voluntarily be taken out in order for something cool to happen. In which case, like, you can try to replicate that in other systems, but like D&D and Shadowrun, like, they don't really have a mechanic to be like, I'm going to self-sacrifice and I'm probably not going to die, but I will stop being able to influence the scene in 3, 2, 1. And that's just like, it's just a really fun bit. Like,
Yeah,
you don't have to die. You can just keep going.
It is a very interesting and again, I think speaks to and highlights the collaborative nature, right? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but the language around taken out in the core books in Origin, and I believe it's pretty much the same in Trinity Continuum Core, the language that surrounds taken out focuses on the idea of you work with the story guide and the player work together and say, okay, well, this is what happens when you achieve this state, right? And then in They Came From, you get your death scene, so you get to, like, soliloquize and get off one last final attack with a giant dice bonus and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's a very cool sort of flagpole to draw attention to. Scott, is there any particular element that leaps out at you as like, this is a linchpin, this is indicative of the system, this is one of the things I really love about it?
Well, I think probably one of my favorite things about it is the procedural mode of play, where sorry, there are people destroying the apartment behind me.
That's all right.
But anyway, the procedural mode of play is really great because of how it's not just exposition dump. It is, a system by which successes translate to clues, which clues can be any number of different ways of doling out informations or solving a puzzle or that. I mean, and it allows me specifically to do my favorite thing in an RPG and in general, which is allow players to ask questions, which adds an additional layer of player skill. If a player asks the right question, then not only do they get the information, but they get the dopamine hit of, oh, I got this information because I was personally clever, not just because the dice rolled.
Right.
Which that's my favorite thing across the board, and that Storypath supports that natively. I love.
No, that is a super cool point. And the other thing about that is when you're in procedural play, especially, you can sort of bank successes. So even if like the story guide is like, well, I've only got 5 successes worth of clues in this scene, but they're just gangbusters. They've gotten 10 successes. You can bank those and just roll those forward into a pool of enhancement that they can draw on later. Well, I'm gonna do better at this punch because I studied this dude for hours earlier and I got 10 successes when I was investigating. So now I know how he moves. Or
they can store it up and ask a question later at a more appropriate time. And there's even a degree of narrative share of narrative control in that you can give the option of like, you define something.
Right. Yeah.
You tell me what's true. I adore that.
That's pretty dope. Chaz, anything stick out to you as one of those sort of linchpins or tent poles system that?
So the thing that I really love and I don't use nearly enough is like the bond system. Like I love character and NPC relations. I love having a character that an MC the characters love and then being like, haha, that was the evil one the whole time, and vice versa. And when I saw that, wait, there's an entire system wrapped around bonding and growing the bonds, and you can spend your bond with someone to get some enhancement, but then you can build it back. I really love that. Very much regret having not used it before. I think in the anima, 2 of my gifts are just about bonds.
Yeah.
So I'm just yeah, I just want more of this.
Yeah, no, the bonds are super cool. The social mechanics, as someone who has a huge background in D&D, and don't get me wrong, I love Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah.
I am thrilled every chance I get to look at Scarred Land stuff. I love D&D. But I love it enough to be honest about its flaws, and one of them is that its social system is flawed by virtue of not being there. There's 2 skills that you roll sometimes, and the rest of it is conditions that are generally applied through magic. You know what I mean? And comparatively ham-fisted at best. Now D&D, you can role play. You can have a game that you never touch a die in any setting. Yeah. You know what I mean? But Storypath has that narrative built in, that a mechanic built into to accompany that narrative element. I agree with that. So, any thoughts on that point, Gilbert? Points that have leapt out to you?
Absolutely. We touched on earlier the fact that I'm a big fan of cinematic and storytelling, and other systems kind of you set the DC and then they don't meet that, you're supposed to just oh, you get nothing, you don't get the information you want, or you don't learn what you were trying to. I love the Storypath system because it doesn't just end when you don't meet the DC. You can add complications where things complicate, and English is so hard. But you can add things. Yeah, you can add things in where it makes it just a little more complicated, but they still can progress. I like the idea of it still just progressing forward. So I borrowed like the example you just gave of someone spending time to watch someone's movement and fight pattern. Very early on, I had one of my players in Vampire. Like he's like, hey, I'm not built to fight, but if I spend some time and just watch someone fight, like I might, even if like in a fight, I just take a few hits. Can I like get a couple bonus die or anything to my attack rolls? So I looked into systems that have that, and Storypath had that. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna implement that. We're gonna do that. So I like the idea like that there's non-conventional approaches and like things just don't end if you don't meet a DC. I love progress.
One of the things that honestly, coming from a D&D space as a writer, was probably most challenging for me the first couple times I tackled Storypath adventures, I guess, was the concept of core clues. The concept that when you're building a scene, there are things that no matter what, the characters are going to find out. And it's your job as the story guide to put that information in their hands. So even if they just botch the investigation left and right, they need to know these things when they leave. And that's just established in the format of the adventures, which I think is a super handy tool to give. And of course, it's the kind of thing that in hindsight, you're like, why haven't I been doing that in everything I've ever written? But there are, I don't know how many relatively well received and respected adventures out there for various systems that have fail points where it's like, well, if the dice are not nice to you today, your story is over now. And there's nothing built in. It's going to be entirely 100% on the DM to figure out how to back out of that corner. Whereas Storypath is by design not that. I did see a question come through in the chat. I just wanted to run it by. Probably something maybe Hiromi would know the most about, but CS Inquisition says, my favorite new Aberrant system is incorporating genre and subgenres mechanically. Any chance we'll see more of those down the road? I guess, I mean, Hiromi, do you have thoughts on that? It seems almost too broad a question. Like,
I'm not on the Aberrant team, so I don't know. Just like in general, like will Onyx Path do more stuff that incorporate mechanics with genres and subgenres? Absolutely. Depending on like what genre and what specific thing that you're thinking about, it may or may not be one of the Trinity lines, like tying mechanics to genres and subgenres. That's just they came from. That's the whole.
right.
That's like that whole line is nothing but that. But like there are tie-ins throughout. You were starting to say a thing?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, to a degree, that's Storypath. You know what I mean? If you have, you talk about Dystopia Rising, you've got your post-apocalyptic zombie horror. They came from, it's all about the various different film genres, and there's definitely a comedy aspect incorporated into it, but you're still like doing very different genre studies. Scion is just a urban fantasy study, I believe it would be fair to say, right? I mean, that's really kind of the niche that it goes into, delving into a high fantasy, right? But you also have with Dragon and Mass of the Mythos, you have some additional genre options that are working in there, some horror, some mystery. Dragon probably
Dragon's more intrigue, but
right. I was gonna say, I'm probably the least familiar out of everything that Onyx Path does. I'm probably the least familiar with what's going on in Dragon. I'm just like, there's dragons. I don't need to know what's going on. Once it's out, I'll play.
Dragon's really cool.
They could be like my little dragons. I could have like a little dragon symbol on my butt and a pair of wings on my chest that shoots love out, and I'd still be like, yeah, that's fine. I'm a dragon. What do I, sold.
Yeah, I think TS Inquisition was talking about like the specific mechanics for genre and subgenre in Aberrant, which I wish I could answer your question, but I don't write for Onyx Path, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do like that system a whole heck of a lot. If anyone was curious, Atomic Youth uses deconstruction and celebrity as its genre and subgenre, which I think pair up really nicely and is kind of like the most similar to the core thing that was going on in Aberrant First Edition. Also, Travis, I just noticed that the stream is tagged as evil characters.
Nah,
So that's funny.
I didn't do that. I might have done that.
You should have, nope, you should not have told us that you didn't. You should have admitted to it and it would have been funnier.
Improv, evil characters, English. Yeah, no, that's all true.
Sure, fair enough. And just one other base touch real quick. There is a genre. Scion has the iron, gold. It's broken down in, was it Mysteries of the World? I believe.
Yes.
Iron, gold, silver, and there's one other type that's escaping me because I don't have the book in front of me. But basically, different toggles you can switch in Scion that affect different aspects of the setting. So you can set them all to the same level, and you're getting one type of world, or you can toggle them. So like you have an iron mundane world where most of the world, they're aware that there's myths, but it doesn't affect everybody on a daily basis. But once you get into Terra Incognita, everything is like, it's 5 of them in total.
Yeah. Iron, heroic, bronze, silver, and gold.
There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, that is incorporated across across the board in the various Storypath games. How much of a toggle they are depends on the particular setting. But even in They Came From, when you're sitting down, one of the things that you do during your session 0 is you figure out the budget of your film, and that's going to affect how you're describing the creatures and what sort of creatures you're introducing. So I think I would, again, I don't have any like secret knowledge I'm trying to hide or something, but I would assume that's something you'll see more of for sure. And what were you? And now, Hiromi, I realize I cut you off being all excited about dragons. So you're saying dragon is intrigue driven, which is...
So the idea with dragon, so like dragon and Master of the Mythos are kind of pseudo canon add-ons. So they are not in the official The World, but if you buy the book or if you have the book and someone gives it to you, whatever, and you want to have that kind of tone shift, then you can go ahead and incorporate that in. They are separate from the main continuity, but they're compatible with it. The idea with Masks of the Mythos is naturally that cosmic horror is real, and some of you might be the children of horrible monsters from beyond, which, that's fun. Fuck it, I'm in charge of the line, I can say it. Damn it, now I'm blanking on the name of the book. Where's my work folder? Damn it. I got excited and then I forgot the name of the book that I was going to spoil things for. Whispers in Darkness, there we go. Whispers in Darkness is the companion for Mask of the Mythos, and it expands the world in several fun ways. It lets you sort of get into creating your own adapting mythos creatures or creating your own, and then being like, this is more of a pantheon. And also at not my insistence, but here is an option. The writers and developers were like, you know what? One of the major characters within the mythos is now a trans woman. Fucking deal with it, because we're taking the fucking misogyny and racism that was all throughout H.P. Lovecraft, and we're fucking throwing it out because we love the genre, and his mistakes as a person do not get to influence the rest of the setting. Like, most of the time, actually all of the other time with Scion, we're pretty careful to make sure that we are as faithful to the myth as possible, and not just like the words of the myth, but like the spirit and intent behind it, because like we're treating the gods as if they still have stories. Like some of the myths and legends that we have for gods are hundreds of years old, and sort of have like this disconnect that we have on Earth between what gods did and now. With Scion, that continuity is present. Like they never left. They never stopped talking. We still get new stories and new myths. It doesn't mean that like we're inventing new myths. It's that we are understanding a space where this this continuity between the gods and the people is continuous, as opposed to like broken up like we have with many religions. Reason why I went on that tangent is because dragons, like Scion Dragon represents a different shift in tone and genre, where the main sort of two factions within Scion are the gods and the Titans. They fight in a thing that the Greeks called the Titanomachy, and we kind of just keep using the name Titanomachy because it's well known and well understood, at least within the West. And so dragons are a third faction, and the reason why no one knew about it in the main books is because dragons are secret. So the reason why no one's heard about them is because dragons are very low key. They are sneaking around. They are trying to get stuff done. The gods and the Titans know that dragons exist, but they're always like, you're on our side, right? Cool. And the dragons have their own fucking agendas, and they don't necessarily line up with things. So you have things where like you're playing against the two factions, you're doing shit on your own. And so it's very much like, what if James Bond was super powered? And not like in the way that he is in the fucking films, but as in like, what if he could turn into a fucking 10-foot tall dragon and eat someone?
Good to see that.
I'll pitch that to like Paramount or whoever owns the rights right now. But
there you go. Yeah, I'm for it. I think that's a good. Well, and that brings up an interesting thought experiment too, I guess, or idea to deal with in terms of the fact that we've got Storypath covers so many different genres between the different lines. And while they're not all like one-to-one convertible, like you would have a few things you would need to reconcile if you were to say take your Scion character over to Trinity Continuum. A couple of things you'd need to change and things you need to sort out. But having said that, though, you could take an approach where you say, here's the core of this person. Here's my origin path and my role path. You know, here are the things that make me me. Here's my, or even just boil it down to basic aspirations. You could start that person off in each of those worlds and have a rich experience playing each of those different characters. So you could see like, what does this basic person's wants and needs translate to if I'm trying to chase them down in the world of Scion, in the world of Trinity. It's an interesting, if you have like a character concept. I know a lot of players have like a concept. They're like, I always like to play the Tiefling Bard. You know, that's the type of thing that you can really sink your teeth into, I think, in Storypath as you got between the lines. Because you can play anyone in any of these games. They're pretty versatile in terms of what type of person you can sit down at the table with. But I think it's very neat that you take those wildly different approaches, those same base aspirations. That makes sense. I'm not wandering too far into.
yeah. There was a question from Zach Rules about how we decide what to do with tasty bits.
Oh yes.
the decision process is fairly loose. So what happens is that in-house developers basically just sit down. They're like, "Hey, developers, like which all of us developers, we're all freelancers. Like we work for the company, but like we don't, we're not like in every meeting.
Right. We're not employees, you know, like you are at like a store.
Yeah, I want to say there's like 50, 60 developers, something like that. There's a fair number of us. And the in-house developers, of which there are 3, they get like basically not exactly pitches, but like very short pitches. Like, who wants to write a thing? Just anything. And it's the developers themselves who are coming up with the ideas, and then those ideas generally go to the line developer, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds cool." And then that's kind of the last time that the line developer has anything to do with it. After that, it's just that developer who writes the thing up and then sends it out. So like when I did Zeus, we just want to talk. I just sort of went, "Hey, this is what I want to do. I want to write an adventure called Punch Zeus in the Face." And Eddie's like, maybe pick a different name. And I'm like, "I don't know. I like Punch Zeus in the Face, but I'll take that note and I'll see if I can come up with something better." And I did. And there was very little process to it. It was basically just someone comes up with a cool idea and then they do it. So there's Tasty Bits is very loose.
It is, and I've done 2 of them now, I think, and one was an idea I was actually like very passionate about, and the other one was like, "Hey, can you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to." So like to give you an idea of how broad the range is, one was like I made the pitch for New Lives. I was like, "We need more paths, and I would like to do more skill tricks, please, thank you." And they were like, "Yeah, knock yourself out." And so we did that one. And then Eddie just like emailed me out of the blue and was like, "Hey, you want to write a superhero team?" I was like, "Do I?" You know, and so yeah, they really do come from sort of everywhere. I don't know. I think that the pitch process for those specifically is just they go to the developers when they need them. But I would like to take the opportunity to reiterate to people the 2 things that you should do if you want to do some writing for Onyx Path. The first thing that you should do is make sure you are checking the submissions guidelines and obeying the submissions guidelines that are over at the Onyx Path website, because that will talk through everything you need to do to formally submit something. But before you even do this, I cannot recommend highly enough that you pop over to the Storypath Nexus over at Drive-Thru RPG and you create something. You know, the best way to show that you know what you're doing is to go do it. Go make something. It doesn't have to be huge. Tasty Bits are a perfect example of taking a very, very small concept, because I think the longest one might be the Amalgamated Idea Dynamics one, just because it's got like splats and full character sheets. So they're all pretty short. But if you can show that you can do that on the Nexus, and then when you send in your appropriate submission through the appropriate channels, following the appropriate directions, then you can also point to that and say, "And I also have this," so that they can see that you know what you're doing. So those are the things that I would advise in the event that you're interested in doing some creating. Go out and create. Did I looking to see if I missed any questions in the chat? I did not miss any questions, I don't think, but I did want to just make a point to remind chat that anything involving Exalted or any other property of Paradox Interactive. You have to Paradox Interactive. You know, as much as I would, love the other, we just get to do what we want. Those aren't our properties. We have to get permission. And yeah, speaking of things that aren't our properties, but Storypath, Dystopia Rising Evolution, I think sometimes we blow past as we're talking about all the other games. But I just ran it recently for a Storypath showcase, and just had a riot running it. Oh my goodness, it was so. If you're into post-apocalyptic fiction at all, if you're into zombies, zombie horror, that's very good. If you're into body horror, there's a lot of really crazy stuff going on in DR because everybody's kind of fungus.
I need that on a t-shirt ASAP.
Everyone's a little bit fungus.
And the other thing I found about it is it's actually kind of probably the most straightforward example of scale, because it really only applies in terms of weapons and vehicles and creatures. You know what I mean? And zombie hordes. Like, oh, that's one zombie. We're fine. Oh, it's a scale 4 zombie horde. We're drastically less fine. So, yeah. We talked about the bits. We talked about, and I know you probably can't get too much into like upcoming stuff, Hiromi, and I know we don't really do like release order and whatnot, but correct me if I'm wrong on this. God is kind of in its in the back half of the development of the pre launch.
God is God has encountered a few sort of slowdowns with pandemic life.
Yes, 2020 and 2021.
Yeah. But I've had it listed in red lines for, I don't know, a couple months at this point, probably several months at this point. But that's only partially true. Some of the writers have I've gotten red lines to some of the writers and they've gotten me their final drafts at this point. So in the future, I'm not even going to put a timeline on it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, but it's
whatever. But at some point in the future, when you see it's Scion God status go from red lines to finals is going to be very short because by the time it goes to finals, I will actually have half of the book in my hand.
Nice.
And then, I wouldn't say that it's in the back half of development because I don't want to put that on myself.
That is absolutely fair.
But
absolutely fair.
It's progressing, and when it's officially out of red lines, it will switch over to development very quickly, which will probably shock a few people if they don't know this.
That's fair. So the few who managed to turn in and catch this will have that little bit of edge. So thanks for joining. I got a question in chat. Do we have any news about the Scion TV show? All the news about the Scion TV show is distributed via the Monday meeting notes. That is, we find out that stuff when you all find out that stuff. And that's the thing too. I guess pulling the focus back a little bit from Storypath to broader Onyx path function. There's a lot of things that developers find out when everybody else finds out. You know what I mean? Like we're not in those meetings. You know, if it's about Hiromi probably knows more about what's going on than about God than I would see on the Monday meeting notes. I know more about what's going on with Dead Man's Rust for Scarred Lands than, but at the end of the day, most of what we're learning. We're learning on the Monday Meeting Notes just like you are. We're tuning in. Which is not to say that it's something about like, keeping us in the dark or something. It's just there's a lot of moving parts, and many of us don't have time to keep up with things that aren't on our plate. Like we's busy bees. So,
and Travis and I have a lot of things on our plate.
We do.
Like, I think right now, I've managed to get several books off of my plate, and I think I'm still actively working on 7. And I'm pretty sure that Travis is working on more than I am at basically all times.
Right now I'm surprised. Oh, I'm in a bit of a like waiting for the levee to break on a few things, but we should take a joint vacation or something. We'll go rent a castle and we'll all play Storypath in it.
Yeah.
So,
like, I would love to be involved with the Scion TV show, but like I'm ultimately, it's ultimately over my head.
Right, and that goes on. There are so many layers. I have a bit of a production background. So does Hiromi. There's so many layers and moving parts that go into something like that anyway. I mean, until something is on the air, it's so hard to know what the hell's going on with it. And I would assume that goes right up to the people that are like in charge of it. You know what I mean? Like it's very difficult to know what's happening until cameras are rolling. But
hell, even if cameras are rolling, sometimes people don't know what's happening. Like I've been on set and I'm just like, all right, we're shooting my scene next. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
6 hours later, are you still on that fucking scene?
Yeah, you're next. 5 minutes. That's my favorite thing to hear on a film set. 5 minutes. Oh, okay.
5 minutes, you fucking liar.
So I mean, sometime before tomorrow, probably, if nothing breaks. I don't miss it, but we got another question. Better Storypath mechanic: enhancements, complications, or momentum rewrites? I don't think that's a fair contest. Those all do different things.
Yeah, no, I like all of them. I mean, so like, sort of like expanding this out real quick. So like, enhancements. If you have success and you have an enhancement, then you have more successes. Complications are things that make your life more difficult. They don't prevent you from succeeding, but like maybe you pick a lock and you break your pick in the process. That would be a complication. So you want to buy off complications, but you don't have to. It's just kicking a problem down the line. Momentum is a shared resource you get as players. So like the players get to share it. When bad stuff happens, you get more momentum, and you can use that momentum to do stuff. Momentum and rewrites are basically the same thing. Rewrites are used within They Came From, because instead of a momentum pool, it's a writer's pool.
And one of the things that rewrites, They Came From hangs a lantern on it, but all of Storypath uses is when you're using momentum, when you're using rewrites, when you're using that piece of the mechanic, it's a collaborative decision, right? The difference being is that in They Came From, you pull everyone into the writer's room and you discuss the process that's described there is just literally the same process you're doing in the other Storypath games, just described as it would happen if you were on the set of a film. There's a wonderful story that I implore you to look up about when Kevin Smith was working on rewrites for Die Hard. Was it Die Hard 4? Live Free or Die Hard? It talks about some of the things that happen with the. It's a good example of what an expenditure of rewrites might look like. Your star is standing outside of their trailer, barbecuing, making phone calls, saying stuff like, "Who's your second choice to play John McClane?" You know.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love that
one. So, coming at it from the other side, I guess, because like Hiromi and I can both talk like literally from like the design side, and these things are very clearly demarked in our brain because we work with it constantly. But I guess starting with Chaz, at the table, when you're making those calls, because a lot of times these aren't spelled out, right, for you. When you're making the call between enhancement, complication, momentum, do you have anything that you prefer to lean on? Do you have anything you prefer to avoid? And what's kind of your thought process on as you're assigning these I guess,
complication?
switches? Yeah.
Like 100%, I love me a good complication, because to me that's the sweet spot. Like, as much as I don't want my players to know this, I always want them to succeed, but like not too easily. And complication is like, yeah, no, like you can succeed, but like if you want to succeed really well or like flawlessly, you have to buy these things off. And so it allows me to be like, this is a pretty old lock and you have this thing, maybe there's an extra 2 complications there just in case. So I'm a huge fan of the complication system. Enhancements I like to throw out just because I want my players to like feel strong, and that's a nice like system way to be like, yeah, you're strong. Oh, you did this thing, you planned and you strategized, you have an extra 5 enhancement, assuming you get that 1 success. And as we learned yesterday, you can go like 5 rolls and have 0 successes, even if you were rolling like 9 each. So like it gives them that feeling of like strength without like guaranteeing it.
Yep.
And I would love to say that I use momentum and rewrite. I often forget that exists. There have been multiple times when at the end of the game, I'm like, oh, by the way, y'all have like 8 momentum now because you haven't used it for like 3 games.
Yeah. My one piece of advice regarding momentum is, as it is a shared resource for the player pool, I believe every player, it is in your best interest to treat it as a shared responsibility. You should know when you're getting momentum. You fail a dice roll, you have momentum coming to you. Feel free, if your story guide is skipping that bit, to gently remind them, do we get a momentum for that failed roll? Because there are a lot of moving parts, and that's the one I forget personally the most, and I see dropped the most in other people's play too.
Yeah, I had a game where they represented them with poker chips because this was pre-pandemic, so we were physically at a table.
Back in the old days.
Yeah, back in the days. But that was a very useful thing because it was a physical thing that someone could just add to the pool themselves. And I generally trust my players, so if when they know they get a momentum, I'm okay with them manipulating that pool.
Sweet. And did you have another toggle or another point that you wanted to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I also really like complications, especially when it gives me the opportunity to force a choice, which I think are the most dramatic and interesting points, is when a player has to choose, like, yes, you have opened the window. But the complication was tripping the alarm. So now you're at the position of you have enough successes to do one or the other. And that's the interesting point of like when they have to choose, like, do I get what I want and accept the consequence, or do I play it safe and not trip the alarm, but I don't open the window? And now we have to try something else. I think that's great. I think tangentially related to momentum, skill tricks are great because they cost momentum to use. I find that skill tricks can really lead to some interesting moments because they can allow you to do sort of off the board wacky stuff that I really like.
Yeah, skill tricks are dope. Skill tricks are dope.
Mentioned poker chips and Nutalint in the comments mentioned having beads or counters in the middle of a table. For folks playing online, if you have a virtual tabletop, then like something that I like doing is just like most virtual tabletops will give you like a map screen or something like that, and drawing tools. Just like put down like a hash mark, because it's fast, and as long as you're using like a contrasting color, people can see it and be like, okay, that's how many rewrites or momentum we have. There are more complicated systems that I think both me and Travis have tried working out, and they're in some stage. I have one that's like overly complicated and ultimately more of a hassle than it's worth, but
I mean, it's real nice to use. Making it's not great. It's like the opposite. Every time something there was an episode of the Tick cartoon where he's trying to disarm a bomb, and he opens the panel of the bomb and it's just wires everywhere, and he goes, "Oh, wiry." And then he pulls the wires to the side and there's a button. He goes, "Oh, easy." It's the opposite of that.
I like eating fudge, but
so I'm sorry. Did you were saying though, Scott, or were you?
No, I was just making a joke.
No, I meant about the point with the skill tricks.
No, I like skill tricks. Like I think that there's some really fun ones, and momentum is not just a pool of extra dice you can roll, but a pool that you can use to fuel cool abilities.
That's what that reminded me of, and then I'll get into your head, Gilbert. A point I wanted to make about skill tricks, because again, I hang out in places and I listen to people talk about their experience with games, and so I wanted to offer a perspective on skill tricks that maybe is implied in the text, but maybe people aren't thinking about applying at the table, which is, depending on what game you're playing, those skill tricks are also you can fold those into your narrative in a way that keeps the hand of the mechanic back. In Trinity, your skill trick, especially if you're playing a talent, might not just be I'm just that good. You might have, gun tool is one of my favorite examples of this. You might shoot something in your character narratively is just frustrated and pissed off, and they shoot the thing. And then it works because you're in an action movie. And that kind of logic applies in action movies, you know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, I'm so good I can do this thing. It can be a manipulation of luck in the case of a talent, a manipulation of fate in the case of a Scion. A manipulation of literally the script in the case of the game from, though it works a little differently in terms of trademarks, it's effectively the same thing. So you can lean into that as well, crafting your story, bringing that mechanic. Gilbert, was there your thoughts on that sort of four-way axis we were presented with? Rewrites versus momentum versus enhancement.
I'm kind of a new kid on the block for this, for running at the very least. But I'm a big fan of enhancement complication. I think whatever fits narratively, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure which one I'll favor, because I feel like it kind of depends on the players. And knowing my players, I feel like with enhancement, they're going to do whatever they can to try to get some enhancement. Kind of like Anima, not last session because I was unfortunately gone, but the session prior, we had like a pool of like 12 enhancement during like one of the boss battles in Terra Firma, Terra Surge. So I'm sure that they're going to try to get up to that level and be like, we have 12 enhancement, we're golden. But I don't know. Momentum stands out to me a lot because I love the idea of a shared resource and a communal thing where everyone kind of needs to agree on when to use it or what's important enough to roll it. Primarily because it takes the it gives them like a little bit of narrative power, and I'm always a big fan of giving the players narrative power. Um, but yeah, like I'm like I said, I'm the new kid on the block. I haven't ran a Storypath system quite yet. Um, I've only dug in deep to the books and played in Travis and Chaz's stuff.
Well, and
So
that
I'm
was part of why I wanted you to be here, because you're about to, dive into the deep end of story guiding, but you've got a fair bit of experience as a player. So getting that perspective is valuable. Absolutely, I think.
yeah.
And seeing how you interacted from that side of the table. And I'll ask you again in 6 months. Hate complications. Nobody hates complications. They're amazing.
I feel like I'm gonna lean on complications a lot because I am the type of person to like, even like I said earlier, even in like D&D or like or vampire or anything like that. You don't meet the DC. I'm not a fan of it just kind of stopping. I kind of put things on a scale like this is what you get to get full access of information. But if you get lower than that, depending on what you roll, I kind of give less or more.
Well, and I saw something come up in chat. Forgive me if this isn't actually a question, but it was Sir Hayashi. Forgive me if I'm murdering the
Senhor
pronunciation as well.
Hayashi.
Thank you. They mentioned, I remember game designing, brainstorming with a friend about RPG, how this constellation system would work socially. You don't convince the other guy, but now he's doubtful of his boss. I mean, this is a thing that sometimes gets, I think, maybe glossed over a little bit in Storypath, because it doesn't have a specific crunch to it, but you can always, anytime the actual rule is anytime the players fail a roll, they receive a consolation. That consolation is most frequently because it's easy. But you can also say, you've shifted this person's attitude, not the way you wanted, but you shifted it. Or you can say, well, the person you were fighting got away, but as a consolation, they left this clue about.
I actually have. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just trailing off the same point.
Okay. I have two constellations that I would work in for that specific scenario where you don't convince the guy, but you get something. The idea there is if as the story guide you're modeling a bond between the guy and his boss, that bond is now lower or gone now. Alternatively, like Travis said, you can change the attitude. You can change the attitude both of the person you're talking to you, so basically increasing it, or you can decrease that person's attitude towards his boss, which is similar to the bond situation, but most of the time you don't want to use bonds with story guide characters because it's a pain. It's a pain to keep track of all that. But the short thing there is that now he doesn't trust his boss, and you like have mechanical information there backing that up, where like the boss is like, go kill the PC, and he's like, nah, I'm just gonna hang out back here. I don't trust you enough to listen to you when you say go commit a felony. I'm with you for a misdemeanor. So like if you want to go like rob that place, like we're good, but like felonies, nah.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that I like to emphasize about Storypath, and if you're coming from a place like, I have a great deal of envy for the 15-year-old kid who picks up a copy of Scion Origin or Trinity Continuum Core and isn't coming into this with a bunch of preconceived notions about the way tabletop games work. Because as a 40-something guy, I started off with D&D, and it's very antagonistic in its relationship between the dungeon master and the players, because you're running a combat sim effectively, right? And there's kind of this conceit about keeping things behind the screen, keeping the mechanics behind this. And Storypath just does not do that. All of these mechanics are there for the players to leverage as well. If you want to, as a player, if you're setting up a social scene, this could be anything from I would like to, ask someone out on a date to I'm trying to convince this person to invest in my business to I'm trying to convince the villain to give up their dastardly plot. You can spend a session setting up, like literally setting the scene, right? I'm going to set it up in this place. We're going to spend X, Y, and Z to have it decorated this way. You can go through all of these steps and generate an atmosphere, which is it's got a system weight to it. You can affect the attitudes of the people that are walking in. That's a system weight to it. And by the same token, when you go into a building, it's not necessarily, please keep in mind, I love every game that comes out of my mouth. I'm a fan of games. I'm not taking a dump on anybody, but Shadowrun, for example, you go in, you're going to break into this place, you're going to steal the data, you're going to get out, you have guards that are pop-up targets that are there to put bullets at you while you put bullets at them until you get the thing. If you're looking at, say, Anima, right, and you're going to be doing some corporate espionage, now as a story guide, you can just have pop-up guard targets, that's fine. But you can also say, well, what's the atmosphere in that building right now? How does that affect things? Now we have a place that we can leverage mechanical weight, and we're called upon by the system to think about those things. We might not think about them if we're running it in a different system, right? What if the guards are on the verge of a strike right now? How does that change their performance? How does that change your chances of bribing your way past them? Or of just saying, look, you're out, I'm out. Any chance we can work this out? You get to have scenes like that that aren't necessarily like that they are enshrined in the system. The means to get there are enshrined in the system, and that's a tool that everybody at the table can leverage.
Never underestimate the power of convincing guards to unionize and go on strike. Like
Solidarity.
fucking, hey, they had you waiting in ambush for like 3 days in that hole. That's an unsafe working condition. Like, no, here. Take this pamphlet. We're gonna fix this.
On the other hand, you can go in with a bunch of guns and just be like, looks like you have a hostile work environment. Like, see, sorry, I'm just getting ready because I know that the holidays are coming up and I will wind up running another installment of Hard Holidays. Because if ever there was a game that Die Hard works well in, it is Trinity Continuum Core. Yeah, so I guess we got about 9 minutes left on our allotted time here. I do want to remind everybody, if you got a question in the chat, go ahead and fire those off now. We'll get the last round of them. But while I'm doing that, again, I'd like to take just a little bit of a tour around and just say, and just ask, I guess, is there a moment, now whether it be just like a cool system thing that you ran into or a cool setting element or just a thing that pops, like the first thing that pops when you start thinking about your time with Storypath. And this time I'm going to go ahead and call on Scott first. I don't think I've called on you first yet.
Oh boy. I think probably the thing that pops the most is I ran a game of Aeon for Polyhedron Plays, which is our behind a paywall Patreon game that we run from time to time. And it was just a great scene when all of the Scions were like collaborating together, combining their powers, and nuking aberrants from like miles away while sitting in lawn chairs. I think the power combination of system of Aeon really can pull off some crazy crap, and that was just fun.
Yeah, you all were throwing curveballs left and right at me. I was running the Storypath showcase, and it was a lot of fun to see those things come together.
Yeah,
I mean that whole group was a riot.
That was fun. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool like system interactions and granularities in the psi powers that are just fun to play with.
Absolutely. How about you, Gilbert? Any moment leap out to you as particularly like emblematic, or something that just really sort of like where it clicked, where you're like, oh, this is something special?
Two spring to mind. The first, in Chaz's Scion game, Become as Gods, when the kitsune we keep talking about was not meant to be a companion. So the bond system kind of took into play there, and because my character showed the kitsune a kindness, she kind of popped back up, and then over time, over the 12 episodes we did, she became kind of like the central focus of our whole existence. She was originally an antagonist and shot me, or had me shot, I should say, and I spared her life, and because of that, like because of a kindness was shown, she kind of came back, healed our group a little bit. And then Chaz kept trying to get rid of her and was like, okay, we're done with this. And we're like, no, we exist for Meg. We will burn this world down if something happens to Meg. And so we kept putting Meg in danger. But yeah, no, that was like the bond system, and like the bond increased over the 12 episodes and like over the time skips and whatnot. And that was just really cool to see, like a flip of like an enemy becoming an ally, and the mechanics of it all, and then like the interaction. She still didn't like me though. Like she was scared of me.
They have everything.
Sometimes you're frenemies, sometimes it's like that.
Yeah, the second one was the aberrant, the planning of what we were going to do to take this dude down on the boat, how we were going to capture Wrath and use people as bait. We kind of did a similar thing with Tank, actually, now that I think about it. Introduced as an antagonist, and then we're like, you're our friend now.
Right.
You have no choice.
And she shot you with a bazooka, so
yeah.
Maybe you just aren't good at picking friends.
Yeah, are my relationships toxic? But yeah, no, the planning of what we were going to do with Wrath and whatnot, and getting the drop on these people was very cool. It was that's kind of where momentum came into play too, because we kept discussing whether or not, because we were all divided, like all of us had our roles to play. I was on the boat trying to infiltrate and like signal a spot for them to teleport in, and I kept having weird interactions with some with the cooks. I think I posed as a low level like chef, and then it was trying to keep up that role and that lie, and then getting confronted by like an enforcer and whatnot, and deciding whether or not, like, hey, should I use momentum? But this isn't even like the final fight. We haven't even seen Wrath yet. Should we use momentum? My cover's about to be blown. I'm about to be murdered on a boat. Luckily, it wasn't necessary. I think I used like maybe one before the big fight, one or two. And then when Wrath came in, it was all just hell breaks loose, and we luckily had our momentum pool, because I would have been dead.
Well, that's one of the cool things about building that up, about failing your way into because by the time you get to where the chips are really down, you've got that resource to tap. Yeah. Chaz, any breakout moments that you're like, oh, okay, this is my jam?
As a storyteller, it was like, I think Gilbert mentioned that like the modern fantasy is super cool, and I didn't realize it until like I just brought in TikTok, which I don't use. But it was just amazing having TikTok be like a key feature in this entire Scion adventure, and that like really made Scion for me. As a player, it was when we were in the warehouse, and I looked at you and I was like, well, I only have like 5 points. I kind of want to do this ability. You're like, no, you should have more than that. And you told me like how much points it had, and I actually had 35 points. And you're like, yeah, you can use all those points at once. And no, oh, I could destroy the world. Yes, let's go.
That's what I mean when I built a Jason Todd type and everyone else was a demon.
Yeah, discovering the difference between your pool and your trait.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
that's a fair moment. I recall specifically the look on your face when you realized like how much you could pump into your crush.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then and that's how Gilbert wound up getting knocked through a boat. And Hiromi, do you have any? This has got to be hard for you, but to pick like a moment where you're like eureka. But do you have one you would like to highlight? I guess.
I mean, like to jump up, the first one is like half built into Storypath and half just a thing that you're like, fuck it, that's cool, we're doing it. Where in your Eon game, we fucking had Cthulhu in our face, and I'm like, I'm a teleporter. I can make Cthulhu punch himself, and that's fun. And I can make it portal, and I can shoot through the portal, and that's cool. But you know what I really want to do now that I have this weird gear that's plugged into my head and is souping up all of my psi abilities? I would like to open a portal in front of Cthulhu and in the fucking sun.
Yeah,
Top tier move.
That was a pretty solid moment.
It's 4D chess right there.
It was a lot of fun, and just the reactions from people and the description of the scene, and like because like everybody was starting to sort of like come together at that place physically as well. So like I know James's character is running up and like just everything goes. I don't remember if it was James or if it was your character Scott that was running up, but somebody was running into the hallway and then just sees everything goes white because this thing opened up. That was so good. And what was your other moment you said you had two?
The other one was actually also a streamed game with Matthew, where we were doing they came from classified bit. So like I did all of the cinematic powers, and there's one called Just Looking for the Bathroom, where people can be super suspicious of you. They catch you, and you just go like, I'm just looking for the bathroom. Like, stop pointing that gun at me. I just need to pee. And like one, I forget whose character it was, but like they were fucked up. They were in like a vault. Like it was very plainly obvious they should not be there, and like the guards just pour in, just like, let me just tuck the MacGuffin underneath my coat, and I just where's the bathroom?
Nice.
I love it. I love when you can reach peak absurdity, and nothing says peak absurdity like They Came From. It is so good. Well, that brings us to 8 o'clock. So I just want to take a moment again to thank each and every one of you for coming here and hanging out, talking about this system that we have so much fun with and that we love. I want to take a moment to remind everyone that is in the chat right now that Anima, Trinity Continuum Anima, is currently on Kickstarter. It is fully funded right now. And if you back it for like as little as $5, you can get access to the manuscript. Basically, everything you need to play the game is out right now in that manuscript. And then the next week is the big setting secrets dump. So if you're not planning on story guiding it, don't read that update when it comes out. Because
I got to make a big decision about whether I'm going to read that or not.
It'll spoil some fun for you. But no, everything else is good and it's out there. We will be back. Chaz, Gilbert, and myself will be back here on Monday for session 4 of our Anima actual play. And Scott has theirs. Do you know when your next episode goes up on YouTube?
I think they drop every Friday. So yeah, there's 3 more left. I think the last one's going to be on Christmas Eve.
We got Monday and Friday 1-2 punches of Anima. I have not yet, partially because I didn't want to get other ideas in my head. I have not yet watched your actual play. I plan on binging it after next Monday.
It's really fun. Eddie took us through a whirlwind tour of the setting, and he did a really good job. And it was a really fun table as well.
Right. I have gone somewhat the opposite direction in that I picked one very, very specific element and was like, we're going to laser focus on that. And then I'm going to pepper in as many like we used to all play WoW references as I possibly can. My crowning moment as a story guide, this isn't true, but it was funny, was I did this big setup for a raid that they showed up to. And then the raid leader comes out. He's all majestic, and he's like riding a Pegasus, and he's glowing, and just everything is like screams like oh, and he flies down and he shoots these beams of light to everybody, and numbers appear on everyone's shoulders, and he goes, "All right, odd groups got left, even groups got right."
Nice.
And then in like 10 seconds, he was taken out. It was
Right.
top.
He fell.
top
I mean,
notch.
he was like the first one to drop when they got into the raid too. So yeah, that was I couldn't. There were too many opportunities to make WoW cracks. I just couldn't help it. So my apologies to Eddie. But yeah. So yeah, we'll be back here Monday playing. I will. I guess I will pass the floor off. Oh, one more thing. Speaking of Trinity Continuum things that are currently in pre-order, you can also go over to Drive-Thru RPG right now and pre-order Assassins, which is super awesome. And we didn't get to really get into it all on here, but you'll be seeing some Assassins on the channel in the relatively near future. I feel confident. But I've just gone ahead and thrown that link over in the chat. And Zach, we've tried. I saw in the chat, Zach asked for a Leroy Jenkins reference. We've tried a few times. We'll get close. We get there. But before we run off, let's have everybody go ahead and just tell us again, if you don't mind, who you are, your pronouns, and anything you'd like to promote. And we will wrap this thing up. And this time we'll start things off with Hiromi and work the other way around.
I'm Hiromi Cota. I am the line developer, content lead, whatever, for Scion. I write and develop a bunch of stuff. You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at Hiromi Cota, because it's my name and no one else has it, because it's Japanese and Mexican. So like, I have a Scarred Lands game this Saturday on Roll the Roll. And I don't know when the next time I'm streaming after that is. So, oh, right. And I write queer fiction, and I'll throw a link to that in the chat.
I was gonna say, you have like a centralized, like, here's all my stuff now site, right?
I have, well, okay. My website, hidomikota.com, is out of date slightly, but it has links to everything. It has links to like 30 of the books that I've written with ways to buy them and stuff.
And yeah, feel free to dump some links in the chat. Gilbert, I guess that brings us to you if we're going the way I think we're going.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Ramos. He, him. I run a show or host I run a game on over on our channel for the Rolling Nomads, so twitch.tv/Rolling Nomads. We've moved over for season 3 over to that channel for like season 3 of Thy Kindred Come, our vampire actual play. I am going to be running a Scion game come January 2nd, if my dates are right. Yes, January 2nd. For Scion, very, very excited for that. I have some questions for Hiromi. I'm probably gonna either after the stream, probably just be like, help. But I'm very excited for that. That is gonna be I don't know how much I can say because we backed the Kickstarter, so we have access to some stuff. But yeah, we we have a very diverse group, and I think only one of them is a scion of just like standard core or like hero stuff and origin stuff. The rest of them are like from Mass of the Mythos um, and the demigod stuff they got released in the manuscript. Very excited, very excited. They're going to be monsters, I guarantee it. In addition to that, I helped Travis write a thing for Vampire, or translate a thing from an older system. Bloody Bottom Boat is on Storypath, Storyteller as well, I should say. Right, Meow on Drive Through RPG. Yeah, that's right. In addition to that, there's Trinity Continuum Aberrant. The notes from our actual play. I think it was like 4 or 5 episodes. So if you want to see, the power difference between the characters I made, or the character I made compared to the nebula inducing character that Chaz created, that's on Drive Through RPG as well. You can see the crazy power differentials. I believe that's all that I do. You can find me on Twitter at Ramos the Nomad. You can find me everywhere at Ramos the Nomad. Twitter, TikTok. I guess the 2 things I use most. That's all I got. I think that was better than I usually do.
Excellent. That's awesome. You did a great job. I loved it. I'd see it again and again. It's better than Cats. Next up, Scott.
Hey, yeah, I'm
for anybody
Scott.
who's under 40, that was a joke once.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I'm Scott Cuban, pronouns are he, him. I run Simulacra Studios. It's an actual play studio. You can find us on YouTube and Twitch at Simulacra TV. Most recent project is Trinity Continuum Aberrant Atomic Youth, where we just had our season 1 finale. We'll be coming back January 5th for the premiere of season 2. It is teen supers, and that's just great. It's the combination of superhero action and teen drama is just mwah. We also play that with via VTuber avatars, so everyone on the screen looks like what their character looks like, because it's all done virtually. So if you want to see what that nonsense looked at, check it out. All those episodes are on the YouTube, by the way. I also am a co-host of Polyhedron, which is an RPG discussion podcast. And also I just started a podcast with some friends, Opcast, which is a Trinity Continuum review and retrospective podcast. So I'm all over the place. And you can see me in the Polyhedron Plays Trinity Continuum Anima actual play that's going on the Onyx Path YouTube right now. I was in Trinity Continuum Aeon Storypath Showcase with Travis and Hiromi. And the notes of those will come up soon, so you can see my ridiculous character there. And yeah, that's about me.
Sweet. And last but most certainly not least, Chaz, please.
So I am Chaz, he, him, they, them, PhD student who does video games, music storytelling. If you want to find me on the internet, I do plan on being back on the Scion kick. I am watching a show right now that has given me much inspiration in how to torture people. So I am working on that. Technically, you can also see me on the Twitches. I don't have a Twitch, but I infiltrate Gilbert's Twitch about every Friday, and we play various games from The Infectious Mouths of Dr. Decker. If you have not gotten enough Cthulhu, we did Until Dawn. We have done some Terraria. So yeah, that is Friday nights. Rolling Nomads. I don't know.
Yeah, twitch.tv/Rolling Nomads. Usually around 10:30 or 11 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
And finally, be sure to check us out next Monday on Travis, where we are going to take back what was stolen from us from Mary. I know Travis actually made a much larger narrative filled with like intrigue and is very touching, but Mary took my loot. She is dead to us.
You run a game for 4 sessions with a group of people, and you think it's about one thing, and then they feel that they have gotten unfairly robbed of a piece of loot And that is now the point of the campaign.
Nice.
You have the answers. They're all right there for you. Nope. We got to go get this loot back.
Right. Like we figured out all the other stuff. Like we can take care of that whenever, but
I needed those shoulders. Christ. And that, I guess, that leaves me. I'm Travis Legge, he, him, they. When I'm not here, I'm over at Plastic Age Plays, sometimes over at Roll for Seduction on Twitch. I write and produce games and game-related content, and I would like to remind everyone within the sound of my voice to pretty please with sugar on top, go get your shots. If you've not gotten your vaccines yet, get them. If you've not gotten your boosters yet, get them. If you've not gotten your flu shot yet, get it. I would love to run around all of the United States in 2022, going to game conventions and hugging people I have not seen in person for 3 years. So help do your part to make that happen. If you can't find a better reason than that, do it for that. Do it so that Travis can hug people. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and go back Anima on Kickstarter.
Wear a mask, wash your hands, get the fuck away from people.